Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to my guest today, which is the wonderful Jean Donaldson. I've known Jean, we're not entirely sure. We know where we met in Canada. I'd been detained till the early hours of the morning trying to get into the country because I'd accidentally said that I was going to a conference and I was speaking, and they then said, well, in which case you need a work permit, and I got detained. But we ended up anyway chatting quite a long time ago. I've known Jean for a long time, and her book The Culture Clash, which is one of the things we're going to talk about, and
That's
I have my
is that 30 years then?
maybe I was surprised actually.
But we've known each other 30 years or
Probably, yeah, so
thereabouts, right?
maybe before that. But anyway, I
Yeah.
better say something about it. Everyone should know you anyway. But
Yeah.
Jean is one of the world's best trainers. So if you don't know her, then you don't know your best trainers in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And she used to work for the San Francisco SPCA, doing a lot of work with aggression in dogs. A lot of experience. And the book The Culture Clash, the really neat thing, and although bits of it have dated, but the really neat thing was it really went after the anthropomorphization of dogs and just tried to strip them down and help the understanding. And those of you that listen to these podcasts know that I did one a little while ago with Pam Reed. And again, these two books, and both books were done, actually, Accelerated Learning was done in the same year.
Yeah.
They really just, I think, laid the foundation for modern trainers using the science of training. It really brought it forward. It brought the science to the people rather than just telling people what to do. It said why. So it's an absolute pleasure to catch up with you, and I'm lucky it's evening for me, so I have a glass of wine.
I know, and I'm technically still in the middle of my work day.
Yeah, so I'm fine. And the other thing about Jean is she's such a brilliant writer. The way you write, I really like. Because you can be, and I said the same with Pam, actually, both of you, you are really good at being critical, but being nice about it, I think.
Some people would disagree with that, but I do try. And I must say that what you were holding in your hand as a first edition and the writing in the second and third editions was kinder. I did sort of, fix some stuff and I mellowed out. I think I got a little less strident over the years. That was the first edition of Culture Clash was very much sort of vomited out. As I was just like losing my mind, like in 1995, with just the plethora of trainers torturing dogs, and the way they defended it was just so lame that I just at the time I wrote it, I didn't think if anybody would ever read it, that it would never be published. It's when you've just you're just nobody and you're writing a book, and so the language was pretty strong. I think that turned some people off, unfortunately, although others were like, yeah, like you're our chef. Thank you for doing that. I was catharting a lot of other people.
But I think that's the thing. I mean, there are lots of things in it. And that's one of the joys of doing these is I sort of pick up the book, and with all due respect, I hadn't picked it up for quite a while. I've got quite a lot of books, and you can see behind me that's only 3 of the 13 bays that I've got in this room, and most of it is dog books. There's a few horses and cats as well, but yeah, just reading it, and you realize that, hey, this is Jean talking about the dominance issue back in 96, and and it's only I think we have made progress over the last perhaps 5 years, but
massive
but
progress.
why only the last 5 years? Because you were talking about this 20 years before that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, but it's you say you just sort of vomited it out, but I it's a great stream of consciousness because it's punchy, but it's really clear, and I really like that.
Right.
And I must admit, I've never read the later editions, so
yeah. I mean, it's probably why we hit it off, because we don't mind. Sometimes, perhaps, especially people who are not quite ready or sitting the fence, can be turned off by stridency or turned off by, but not everybody.
to me, it's passion. But anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I mean, I care.
yeah, I think that's it. And I think, yeah, people sometimes think I'm brash, and yeah, I'm direct.
Oh, you're not. But your English brash, which is so much better than, North American brash.
Oh, shall we go there? What's English brash? What's English brash? What's North American brash? Yeah, we don't go around with semi-automatic weapons. That's true.
For instance.
Yeah.
We should say that this is being recorded in January of 2021. So anybody who's seeing this in the future can just Google that era.
Yeah. If we're no longer here. So, but anyway, so let's start there, because as I said, we started talking about that. So what kicked you off to write this book anyway?
I had recently, a few years earlier, actually in 1990, I decided to, I was whether, okay, am I going to stay in grad school? Am I going to go into animal welfare? That was one option. Am I going to become a musician, or am I going to train dogs? Anyway, long story short, I ended up sort of having a poof, sort of, and I said, I'm going to train dogs. I'm going to try and contribute there and help dogs. In other words, just to carve out, okay, where can I try and make a contribution? Well, I'm going to do dogs. And at the time I was in an obedience club, and the prevailing, training climate around there was that anybody doing non-aversive training, so anything with using positive reinforcement, negative punishment, were fringe. I mean, we're very much sort of like, not expected to last, and bleeding hearts or crazy, or etc. And there were people in the obedience club that I was teaching with that they wouldn't, I sort of asked, I'd been to seminars and I'd, read, and I knew something from school, and I said, could I possibly teach my classes, using some of these alternative methods? And not only did they look at me like I was insane, they just forbade it. They just outright said, no, you can't. And then some of the characters in there, when they would be talking about, especially, dominance, it was used almost by them entirely as a pretext for heavy-handed training. So it's extremely sort of dominance light. And this presumption that dogs, I'd watch dogs, they'd be training their dogs, and these poor little dogs, these frightened Shelties, just falling down screaming because they're about to get an ear pinch because they were being insubordinate and not doing some simple behavior like jumping over a jump. And there's just no way that, just in my mind anyway, that a dog would be trying to make a point about some place in the pecking order, about his status. I mean, this idea of status, I think it's something that, I think primates are very into. And so we can't help but project it. And that the dog, this poor little dog, would prefer to be tortured than to give up making his point on principle about dominance, and it's the whole thing, and many other things like that struck me as not only absurd, but Orwellian. It was really this world where dogs were basically victims. I mean, it really looked to me as though they needed help. And I was just, very angry, and had just decided at one point in 1995 to just put it on paper, and it's first thing I'd ever written, and out it came, and then it found like-minded people who were also struggling as I was with the aversive training culture, and the pretext put forward to support it. I think that it really wasn't necessary.
So I think in the UK we were probably more just jerking dogs on leads. We had Barbara Woodhouse.
So were we. So we were, and also electric shock, jerking dogs on leads, and in competitive obedience. So I came from the world of competitive obedience, ear pinching dogs for retrieves.
See, we didn't see ear pinching. I don't think really took. I mean, maybe some people will correct me, but certainly when I was growing up, I wasn't aware of ear pinching. Yeah. Shock collars a little bit, and even now, well, actually, a lot of dogs are trained with shock collars still.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more sort of dragging the dog into compliance. You didn't train a dog before 6 months of age in any case,
for instance.
And there was the sort of you beat the dog to mold it. but I don't think we were
And it's good,
pinching.
somehow good for the dog. It's character development. It stops these
Yeah,
attempted
sounds
coups,
like my
and
schooling actually. Sounds like...
yeah, yeah,
I'm
it was good.
afraid
And
my
if you
secondary school was like
failed to
that.
do that, the dog was going to stay up at night, plotting to, I mean, do what? Exactly. It's a dog.
It's an interesting one, because actually I joke about my secondary school, but it does remind me, those of us that survived my secondary school, we are quite resilient. But I think how much wastage there was of real talent, of people who just, because it was fairly brutal in many respects.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm not very big, so my job was to try and be as invisible as possible to survive. Yeah. So I mean, but there's obviously that dominance issue. I mean, but the other thing is you bring together a lot of the learning theory and it's something that comes up in several of your books, this idea, and I really like it, and I sort of picked up on it again, as I said, as I started to read things, that dogs spend a lot of time guessing what we want. And I thought I'd forgotten. It's one of those things, and again, you have to apologize, because you sometimes you sort of read something and you forget where it's come from.
Yeah,
And and then somebody thinks, oh, you've stolen my idea, or that, and you think, well, yeah, and you just think, well, no, I've read it in several places and I just can't remember where.
Right.
But this thing about dogs guessing,
Yeah.
a number of years ago, we did some work where we trained dogs in one room, and we literally moved them into the other room and gave them the same commands, and saw how long it took them to get back to the same level. And it took, they couldn't transfer.
It wasn't instantaneous, was it?
And this is it. They learn in a very contextual way.
Very.
And
and we don't. I mean, what we do, actually we do, but we're much better at transferring stuff than dogs are. And again, we project our abilities to dogs.
Well, we pause and think.
We can't help but imagine our minds in the body of somebody who's dear to us, and seems to operate and seems to have the same primary emotions and so on. We can't help but imagine they also have all our brain power.
Yeah, and that's the thing which with my work, that's the thing that I sort of I say, that the more I do stuff on dog cognition, actually the simpler I think dogs are quite often with the cognitive ability.
But it doesn't make them less valuable, and that's the key bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not denigrating dogs.
No.
Intelligence is not the only act in the talent show.
No, absolutely. And and I think it's they work quite simple rules, but because we can do this abstract thinking, we just seem to assume that anything that behaves like us must also be doing it in an abstract way, thinking about these things. And they're not. They're incredibly observant. They're looking for those.
And as you said, they're guessing. They're just trying to get through their day. In many ways, they are kind of like us. We're just trying to get through our day and not have anything horrendous happen. Accomplish key objectives, and and that's it. It's not a conspiracy.
So this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I don't think I have asked you about this. And as I say, there's the cognitive side and there's the emotional side, and the emotional side is the area that, as I think more of my research is focused on, and we'll probably come back to that. But since this was published, things have moved on, and we do know more about the way that dogs think. And I'm just intrigued to know, and I'm here putting you on the spot. The do as I do paradigm.
Yeah.
So how do you see that operating from the dog's brain point of view? Because there are various ways why a dog might follow. For anybody who doesn't know what do as I do is, Claudia
Fugaza.
Yeah, it's Fugazi. Yeah, I was going to say Fugazi, but that's a Marillion album, which is Fugaza. Yeah, and Adam's group, did some work, and this is basically, you demonstrate something and the dog seems to copy, and so you don't have to do as much shaping. I'm just intrigued from your perspective, because in the nicest possible way, I can think of you as a behaviorist, although you are a cognitive psychologist as well. the principles, and certainly, you know, in things like the culture clash, we've got to start somewhere. It was getting people to understand those processes. How do you see something like Do As I Do operating in from the dog's perspective? What do you think is going through the dog's mind at that point of view?
It's a fraught topic, because I know there's a great deal of belief in it. I'm more of a skeptic. In looking at all the original literature, I'm struck by the small sample sizes. The original research was one dog. The presumption of imitative learning, when they've not really ruled out stimulus enhancement effects, social facilitation effects, and operant conditioning. There's also in some of the not the very first, but the later ones, there's a great deal of emphasis or a great deal of stock put into what are called transitive behavior. So behaviors that are operating on objects. So there's a jump or a box or an item. And if you control for those things, it kind of evaporates. So there's one thing, which is the research. I think the research platform on which it's based is weaker than people think. And that's my opinion. I know there are people who think otherwise. And the other thing is, if it is true, you know, if dogs have this tool in the toolbox, why are they not using it with the readiness with which a 18-month-old baby does, where they'll spontaneously imitate any novel action almost compulsively? In other words, that's how readily we are able to imitate. You don't see dogs using this unless you're presuming they're, you know, doing it when you fail to rule out other possible mechanisms. And so, you know, so even if they can't do it, is it an efficient way to train? Wouldn't you rather say sit than sit down yourself? And wouldn't you rather say, you know, fetch, or, you know, then go and fetch something yourself as the cue or the way to teach the behavior? It seems, you know, even if it was true, it seems marvelously inefficient. So my worry is that it seems to be, usually in science, we're striving to disprove our hypotheses. And my worry about the Do As I Do crowd is that they're kind of striving to, you know, cram, you know, this ability into dogs. And I'm
so glad I asked you this question.
I'm not convinced.
No,
yeah,
I am so glad that I asked this question, because I'm
not convinced.
I knew, well, I was intrigued what your answer would be. And listening to you, and again, it's, yeah, you're going back to this again, that actually, and one of the criticisms, and this is one of the great things about this book, is, yeah, you're very critical of, people look to, it's a natural human state to look to confirm, you know, confirmation bias. I believe this, here's the evidence.
Right.
And ignore any evidence that doesn't.
Because it sure looks like they're imitating, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, to an untrained eye.
And and you say this sort of issue of, stimulus enhancement and delayed rewards, we know that work. So have I ever told you the story about the work, you know, Rico, the dog with the language abilities that appeared in science?
No, but I don't think you have. So yeah, the one with like hundreds of objects.
And who died in mysterious circumstances. So when they found Betsy, the second one, they had to keep her under lock and key, because there was a feeling that somebody may have had it in for poor old Rico. So so again, just for people listening who don't know the story, Rico had made the front page of Science, was a dog that seemed to have this amazing linguistic ability. The lead author was Juliana Kaminski, who I know very well, a lovely person. And she, they basically found, they said that the dog seemed to have this linguistic ability, fast mapping. And fast mapping is that, you know, if I say, let me just grab, you know, if you know the word for ruler and you know the word for pen, but you don't know the word for scissors, and I say, pick out the scissors from the three of these, because you know these two, you now learn the word scissors by deduction. And that's how it's thought that kids earn lots of language. That will not make any sense whatsoever for those people who haven't got the video, but never mind. Never mind. But anyway, I was just holding up rulers and pens and scissors and things. And they claimed that this dog seemed to have this ability, and this is how the dog was developing a very rapid language. And I remember reading the paper and thinking about this, and we'd just done some work whereby we'd shown that dogs were actually very capable of making associations with labels after quite a big delay. So if you asked them to fetch something, they brought it back, and you rewarded them, they would then learn that label, even though you didn't repeat the label when you gave them the reward. But if they just randomly selected something, they would now acquire it. That doesn't require any fast mapping. The other bit of the jigsaw was, well, why would the dog learn new words? And for some reason, we were doing some stuff on dogs being neophilic, so they're attracted to novel things, and thought, well, if you put this together, if dogs are naturally attracted to novel objects, if you give them 30 toys that they know and one that they don't, they will go to the one that they don't know. Yeah. And then if you say, thank you for bringing me the Tyrannosaurus Rex, which actually is what they had in the video, then you've got, the dog can do it through those two simple processes. Yeah. One is neophilia, so I'm attracted to the object that I don't know what it is, and then the delayed conditioning between the name, and actually it wasn't that big a delay, because when the dog came back, they would say, thank you for the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and here's a treat. And
also you've got the benefit in Pavlovian conditioning, you've got the enormous benefit of a novel to novel. So you've got a new word with a new object that's going to facilitate faster classical conditioning.
So we thought, okay, we ran the neophilic experiment, and we wrote to Science and said, look, we think there is a simpler explanation, and it's based on these two studies. Unfortunately, this was by the time we got around to it, was about 6 months after the paper, and they said, no, we don't take we don't take work that refutes the papers we've published. Especially 6 months later, and you think, well, this is what science is. So we ended up publishing those two papers.
In theory, if the title of the title of their publication is Science, but here's the thing: is your explanation is exceedingly unsexy. And language is exceedingly sexy, and never underestimate that.
Well, this is the problem with a lot of the work. People are looking for the high level explanations,
which is laudable. If it's actually, I should only say, if their motive is to inflate the value of dogs, so that they may then get treated better. I think that's laudable. Yeah. If their motive is to get published in Science, then less laudable.
Well, I don't think it was to get published in Science. I think they genuinely believed it, at the time, and I think they genuinely believed it.
Subconsciously, I suppose.
And I know that, Juliana, and I have a lot of respect for her. She does some really cool work.
Oh, yeah. And she's done some good sort of refutation of other stuff.
Yeah. And anyway, so I think this was the quickest rejection I've had for a paper. I think it was about 30 minutes. We submitted it. So
you don't need to read it.
It got kicked out straight away. So we published it separately. But again, to me, the concern is, if people think that dogs have these abilities and they don't, then their expectations of when they fail, they then use it as a justification for punishment.
Right. You're basically flying blind. You're going down the wrong alley. So there's both the question of, so where's that going to lead in terms of the interventions you're then going to do if you're making those assumptions. And the other thing is, I don't know. I don't know if other people find it at all disturbing that dogs are not valuable as they are. Why are they not good enough? Why, if they're they're enormously successful. I mean, if you compare dogs to their much more glamorous cousins, wolves, in terms of who's reproducing whom in 2021, they're incredibly successful.
Even though we're neutering,
they've co-opted us to provide veterinary care, to look after them, to make sure they live to their full elderly age. We have conferences about their welfare and their emotional well-being and so on. This is a successful species. They don't need these other tricks, that we're trying to ascribe to them.
Yeah, we've got, I'll share this with you because probably by the time this gets edited, the paper will be out. So we've got probably going to upset some other people now. Well, actually, I just realized it's Juliana again. So this stuff about the inner eyebrow raiser. So there was this paper that they did, where they looked at dogs in rescue. So again, for people who don't know, so there was some work done. They looked at dogs in rescues and what was in their facial expressions that increased the chance of them being rehomed. And they found that the inner eyebrow raiser, just sort of raising one eyebrow, those dogs that did more of that were more likely to be rehomed. And it was a really curious paper when it came out.
I see. I always say, okay, it looks like they're thinking.
Yeah. Okay. And they said, well, maybe it increases the eye size and it has cute effects and all sorts of things. Yeah, maybe it helps at these levels. Then not year before last, I think now, I think it was 2019, they published a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS for short. And they looked at the muscles on the faces of wolves versus dogs, and they found that the inner eyebrow raiser was more developed in dogs. However, if you look more closely at the data, then the difference is not as great as was made out. And everybody was saying, wow, this is amazing. Dogs have, this is the basis of the transition from wolves to dogs and domestication and everything. So I have a PhD student Annika Bremhorst, who's she's doing a PhD in Bern as well as at Lincoln at the same time. She's doing 2 PhDs at the same time. She's lovely, and we got to doing an experiment. And as an aside, we started to see this eyebrow raiser, and we started to look. And the condition that we basically had this situation whereby we were giving dogs treats, and the dog learned that they would get a treat after a certain period of time, and then we held back giving the dog the treat. And what we were interested in, it was, how do you read a dog's face? And I know you've heard me talk about this before, when the dog is in excited anticipation, give me the treat, as opposed to frustrated, give me the treat, and so we trained them that there would be a 5-second delay, then they'd get the treat, and then they could see the treat, and we kept the screen down for 15 seconds, and we videoed their faces. Now, as part of that work, we had both a social and a non-social condition. So we had somebody giving the dog the treat versus the person being invisible. We also did it both with a treat and with a toy, because we didn't want the facial expression. The idea is that we could start to tease out the difference between expressions of motivation from emotion, because if it's a common across rewards, it's more about the anticipation of reward, which is emotion, whereas if it was specific to the food, it's about I want food, which is motivation. But anyway, as we started to look at these videos, what we found was that, we saw the inner eyebrow raiser, and when we analyzed them in more detail, what we found was the inner eyebrow raiser was more common in the non-social condition. So this idea that it's been selected for as a communicative feature, I'm afraid, goes out of the window, because
that's inconvenient.
And the other thing that we spotted on the video and did some further work on was, well, if a dog is looking up, then the inner eyebrow raiser goes up. Well, if you go into a shelter, where is the dog relative to you? Dogs like to look at human faces, so they're looking up, so their eyebrow raisers go up. And it's a consequence of the movement of we think it's a byproduct of the movement of the eye, and it's nothing to do with it evolving as a communicative cue.
It's a gaze direction artifact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to be coming out fairly soon. So this won't go out until at least the paper is.
Won't you be popular?
Yeah. Again, but but that's how science makes progress, and that is the thing.
It really is,
and
it mustn't be seen as raining on. I mean, the amount of times I've been sort of accused of raining on parades and stuff. But like, aren't you interested in the reality? I mean, don't you want to really know?
Isn't it
I always want to say to
fascinating?
people, don't you want to
Yeah,
know?
exactly. And
Don't you want to know?
one of my friends said, don't you feel guilty for unmasking the magician? And sort of when you do
No, I
this,
want to know.
no, because when you find out how they do it, it's even more fascinating.
Right. Right.
When you can.
There's nothing wrong with reality.
Yeah. So yeah, and again, I think it's really important that people don't confuse, just because that's how science makes progress. And God, people need to learn what science is at the moment, because the world is in a bit of a
why there has to be replication attempts. That's why there has to be critique. There's why things have to be pulled apart and dissected and redone and better controls applied. And so it has to be that way.
So the other thing, which and I will just tell you this bit of the story, because I think this is really important for people to hear as well. Annika is just finishing her PhD. She's just had a baby as well. I mean, she's very, very talented. And when we discovered this, she had applied for a postdoc at Portsmouth, which is where Juliana and Bridget Waller are based, and she's been offered it. And we said, well, okay, let her know that you're going to be publishing, and they're absolutely fine about it.
That's fantastic.
And I just think, that's what people need to hear. It's not scientists shouting each other down as other people. Science is about, here's an idea, let's have a look at it, let's test alternatives. And I say to people, I became a professor because I make lots of mistakes and I learn from them. I don't learn completely, but that's how science works. You have an idea, they propose a hypothesis, they offered a fairly high level communicative explanation. Actually, it's a much simpler one. And here's the experiment that can demonstrate that. Needless to say, we did try to get the paper into proceedings. No, we're not going to. And I think it's a real shame, because, as you say, it doesn't do science any good to not be publishing the papers that challenge and refute some of their papers,
because then, I mean, and especially in terms of people who are not reading every paper, they're going to get the headline, and the headline is going to have been the initial result, and so they don't have an opportunity to revise their thinking, which makes it sort of such an uphill sludge trying to educate the public.
At least when they rejected it, one of the reviewers we did get it reviewed, and it didn't get rejected quite so quickly. And one of the reviewers said, well, you need to have this control. And we went off and did that extra control in what we're publishing now. So that was good. But it was, but it's fascinating. So, okay. So seeing as we're on this topic, and as I said, I hope you're enjoying it. I'm having a great time.
Oh, yeah.
So what are the other things that you think people talk about at quite a high level still that actually really are simpler? Are there any other ones?
Imitation is a big one.
I was chatting when I did the podcast with Bonnie Beaver.
I'm kind of glad guilt has been kind of thoroughly debunked now.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
There's still little whiffs of sort of.
So Alex, and I must ask Alex to do one of these. Yeah. So Alex is, it's from what I've heard, and this is why I must do one with her. She says, well, I'm not saying that guilt doesn't exist. I'm just saying that there are other explanations. So I don't know where she stands exactly on that. So
but I think that there's a good deal of unfortunate fallout from that one. That's one that ought to get attention because of the ramifications day to day for the welfare of many dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people think if you're guilty, then you've done wrong.
As I suspect that they're just afraid or offering appeasement gestures and so on, then that needs to be authoritatively trickled down to everybody. So anybody who's on the fence or as you say, Alexander Horowitz needs to get on their horse and get really
Yeah.
look into this. I mean, I'm not, it's not for me to direct who researches
Yeah.
what, but I worry about that one a little bit.
So you say about directing research, let's go back to that, because you recall the first time we met with Susan Garrett, we were up late one night and we were talking about the use of lures and free shaping versus the use of lures. And again, just to put it in context, this is the sort of thing we end up chatting about. So the question was, we were discussing whether or not a dog would learn more efficiently by just free shaping to go to a mat. So you would click and reward it when it happened to wander onto the mat versus luring it. And both you and I thought the luring would be the more efficient. And Susan said, no, she thought the free shaping would be. And we came up with a protocol. We never published the work. And it's just one of those things. So, but what I did, because I was teaching a group of students learning and training, we did it as a practical. So we had, I think it was 8 or 10 replicates of it. And everybody did this. And what we found was that Susan was right, that actually the dog, it was more efficient to do the free shaping. But then and then sort of after it, the thought was that because you and I work with rescue animals, they need that little bit extra motivation. Whereas with Susan, she's working with high performance, and although you used to compete at very high levels as well. So, but anyway, but you and therefore, for me to get the sort of dogs that I see in the clinic. Yeah. And I think the dogs that you were working with, to actually do something, you've got to give them quite clear.
And the other thing is, I mean, there's so many controls that need to be done in that kind of comparison. You got to control for trainer skill level. You got to control for dog naivete. So many bits that can influence that. And also, what are you choosing as the behavior? Is it something that is, that free shaping tends to do well versus prompting and fading tends to do well? So all those things, I think we're sort of commencing to do that study, and we're finding that there's lots of things that we want to be controlling for.
And that's the thing, you can't generalize it from one context to the other. And we were saying about this earlier, about when we did the stuff on dogs understanding commands, and we taught them in one room and we moved them into the other room, then it takes 4 or 5 trials before they're back up to the same level.
Yeah.
And again, you hear this the whole time. The dog is very obedient on a Thursday night in the village hall, but when the dog goes home, the owner says he seems to have forgotten everything. It's a new environment. And again, this is the thing that I think you again really brought to light for the first time for me in that book, was this idea that dogs, they have to do a lot of guessing. They're not very good at this generalizing. The
thing that they generalize well, and I know this is something that you've made massive contributions to, fear. And that's sort of the bane of existence for anybody in applied behavior, in dogs anyway, and I think probably in cats too, is fear and anxiety. That the technology lags there. Questions of whether it's more efficient to free shape or prompt and fade a dog onto a mat, to me pale in comparison to what are we going to do about the number of dogs who find innocuous normal things in their day-to-day lives terrifying.
And the thing is, and this, it makes so much sense though to generalize fears. And again, this is the thing that a lot of owners don't realize. But if you don't run away on one occasion and it costs you your life, that's a very big price to pay.
That's right. Yeah.
But when I start to explain this to owners, they find that very liberating, actually.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So my dog isn't mentally ill.
Right.
No, he's very scared.
He's doing something that was once very adaptive, and it's highly conserved. It's that simple.
Absolutely. And they find a lot better, because then they can start to work with. And sometimes I don't know if you find this, but I find that when you start to explain this to an owner, sometimes it's almost as if sort of a weight's been lifted off their shoulders. So, and they start to feel sorry for the dog so much more.
Right.
You know, that it's sort of,
Right.
oh, well, he's got something wrong with
Yes.
him, and, you know, and they're angry with him for having
Yes.
something wrong with him, as opposed to, oh, okay,
Yeah.
it's part of being a dog. And,
Yeah. Right.
you know,
And he
and yeah,
can't help it.
he's a sensitive individual, and
Yeah, that's right.
I need to understand him, and getting it at that
Yeah.
level.
Agreed. I mean, anything that buys empathy is good for the cause.
Mm. Keep talking, I'm drinking. I think you're doing a good job. Anyway, so the other thing which I just scribbled a little bit about, there's a quote from you in the book which says, models need to be judged by how useful they are, not how intuitive they are. And again, I love that. I think that's a lovely phrase. I ought to have that above
Yes.
my desk, because again, I think that is so important. And again, it taps into that. We tend to think, oh, well, this is the obvious explanation, and actually the obvious is not necessarily the right one. And especially when you're talking about reasons in another
Humans,
species.
we have this remarkable tendency to believe our own thoughts. You know, if it's popped into my head that this is how the world seems, it must be true.
Mm.
You know, and it's something that I think we fit. I mean, science pushes back against, science at its best pushes back against this admirably, but it's not something that we're inclined to do. You know, we need the constraints of science, because left to our own devices, we are going to sort of, you know, buy our thoughts, you know, most waking moments.
Yeah, and I think as scientists we do that as well. We get into it. We get it. You know,
and as you
we have
said,
a hypothesis, and we find
confirmation bias can sweep you into, you know, unfortunate territory.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good point. And you know, if nothing else, anyone listening to this, thinking about why you make the assumptions that you do as to why your dog is doing that, and
it's why everybody should read. I think you even mentioned it at the last sort of batch of seminars that we did with you. The book "Thinking Fast and Slow" by Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah.
It should be required reading, you know, at sort of the high school level or something, just so, you know, how does your own brain operate? And isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
You know, that we are prone not just to random error, but to biases in particular directions in particular situations. And isn't that interesting? I mean, aside from just being
got him a Nobel Prize.
Oh my God. Yeah. Right. Which, you know, of course they should have won for that, you know, but that, boy, is it ever applicable?
Well, I mean, the reason why he got the Nobel Prize is he basically sort of told economists humans are not rational beings.
You know? Not because of sort of errors in emergency rooms to do with echocardiograms. No, it's because of money.
Well, but it's sort of
the important stuff.
But you know, just don't think that humans are going to be rational about it. That's
right.
Right. And but it's that we will go with the lazy explanation because it's less cognitively demanding.
It's less expensive. Thinking is expensive behavior.
And the problem is, I think as humans, we actually do the lazy thing and then think about it afterwards and come up with a lovely elaborate explanation of how smart we are. And it's a little bit like, you know, you're driving along and somebody steps out in front of the car and you put your foot on the brake, but actually your foot was going to the brake before you even thought about putting your foot on the brake.
Yeah, that's so interesting,
you know,
that you think you're commanding your foot, and no, your brain's telling you a story that, you know, that your brain was in on it. Yeah.
And that's what, and so I think there's a lot of that goes on. But anyway, so where should we go to next? Well, as I say, I've got a copy of Fight here, which I'd realized you'd actually scribbled in. And then Train Your Dog Like a Pro. Again, I really like this book.
I like that book a lot too.
And although it's Train Your Dog Like a Pro, it's incredibly simple. You know, and again, you do a great job of stripping things down into really simple processes. And as I said, I hadn't picked this up for a while, and I now think I'm going to make sure this is on our reading list for our students, because in fact one of them asked me about sort of a good scientific but practical training book, and I have to apologize. This is
very little theory.
But it's just, it just takes things through, and again, you break them down. These are the basics, the dogs are still guessing. This is the next level you have to go to, and it's that breaking it down into those different things like distance and stuff like that. And that's just something which I've feel strongly about. As soon as you go 6 foot away from the dog, you're out of his personal space. You meet something completely different.
Massive. And when we used to do competitive obedience, we saw, when you're required to do some of the exercises, it's all very stylized, but you're required to do some of the stuff. I think it's about probably 30 or 40 feet away, and as you're sort of when we were increasing distance, I noticed again and again, so there's like a 6 foot kind of hurdle that once you get past 6 foot, and then once you get past 10 feet, it almost, the distance between 10 and 30 is much, much less worrisome to the dog than the distance between 3 and 6. And now I don't know whether that is, because of something visual, whether that's because that just the difference between 20 and 30, or whether the dog is getting better at, changes of distance because we do it in that sequence, that the dog is just getting better at, it's probably this answer again. And no, I don't know if anybody who's looked at that in particular, but that's sort of my, one of those is my hunch.
It's not a difficult experiment to do. We just start
not
the
at all.
Long distance off and then move forward. But it's a neat one because I do think there is something there, because dogs see the world very egocentrically, the space around them, and we've known that for a long time. So again, just for those people who don't know, when we think about egocentric space, what it means is you think about the world relative to yourself. So my wine glass is in front of me. That's an egocentric description. It is on the desk is a geocentric description, because that's referring to another geographical landmark.
It's a particular ability. I mean, I was building like a little bookcasey thing yesterday, and you have to extrapolate from the diagrams to the three-dimensional reality. And some people do that well, and some people do it not so well, or finding your car in the parking lot, or anything that has to do with where is this in relation to this is out there, when it's not, as you say, egocentric. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm probably, is this something that I don't know the research that is inclined more, that males tend to be better at that?
Well, males often have better spatial memories because, it depends on what the ecology is of the species. So men, human men. So in human men, there is an argument that, as on average, and again, before people jump in and say, hang on, my husband's got crap spatial memory and whatever, and I've got brilliant. But on average, men tend to be better. And the thought was because they had to learn more about
warfare,
landmarks and hunting and that sort of thing. But that can be culturally dependent as well. So depending on who has that role. So how much of it is genetic versus,
and how much of it is practice
is from a very early age, we really don't know. But so the dogs with the egocentric and and because most animals are very egocentric, but I think maybe because we use language, it's not much good me saying the glass of wine is in front of me, because that doesn't help you because you're there. But to say the glass of wine is over on the table, then you
see, the prerequisite for that is theory of mind. That you've got to imagine that I have a mind like you, and that I'm going to be able to place things in space the way you do, and therefore, how would you do that from my perspective? That's some pretty fancy gymnastics.
And so we used to do this as a demonstration with the students. We build this platform, and we had fishing line. I'm sure they say you can do it much more sophisticated way than that. 2 plant pots, and the dog can see that you're putting a treat into one and nothing in the other. You release the dog immediately goes and gets the treat. You do the same action. You walk the dog round to where you were, so the dog has to mentally rotate. Dog gets it right, because he has moved himself.
They can do that.
But if you put the treat in and then step back and spin it around, so
spin the dog around, you mean?
So you've spun the plank around. So what was on the left is now on the right, and what was on the right was on the left. But the dog has seen the plank go spin round,
Yeah.
and the things have changed position, you release
Yeah.
the dog goes to, gets it wrong.
Because that doesn't
Does it?
happen in nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
The stuff where I'm staying still, if I move
Yeah,
around, I'm going to be different in relation to stuff. But
absolutely.
stuff doesn't rotate on planks in
It's dead
nature.
reckoning.
So, yeah.
And it always fascinates. And the really
Yeah.
neat thing is, you do that, and people say, "Oh well, yeah, no, maybe the dog is getting confused, and this, that, and the other." So if you have your plank, imagine your plank is divided into quarters.
Yeah.
So it is pivoted at the half point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means it's equal length either side. If one food bowl is at the end of one plank and the other is 25% in, obviously when you rotate them, they've gone into different positions, and dogs still get it wrong.
Does he do it then?
He still gets it wrong.
He still gets it wrong.
Yeah, because he's just heading. I know it's the one from his point of view. I saw the treat go into the one on my left.
Yeah.
So even after this rotation,
I will go
towards my left.
Have you done it where it's like really quite near the fulcrum, it's right near the center, and the other one is very far away, so
Yeah.
that when you rotate them,
pretty much,
and still.
I mean, we haven't had them both on the same.
Have you done it where you put the treat in the one near the middle and then rotate it, and then it's still the one near the middle?
Yeah.
Does he then get it right?
No,
I bet he'd get it right then.
No, he will go to the side where he saw it.
Side. Okay.
Yeah.
It's always going to be side bias.
But it's always sort of, this is it relative to me. And again,
right.
And I used to do this as a practical with the students on a distance learning course. And I said, and we had these instructions on how to build the piece of kit. And I said, get the data. If you find a dog that can do it, video it.
Yeah.
And I want to go and test that dog.
But the other thing is,
I reckon
they haven't trained it, because you could train it.
But these dogs have to be naive. So this is it. I never had a student take me up on it. They could find a dog that could do it. Yeah. And it just blows people's mind that this is so basic. But this is why
for us. For us
it is. But this is why we have to take the time.
Smelling 1 part per million of blood in a swimming pool is easy for them.
Yeah.
It's okay to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah. So that's a really nice way of putting it. That it's just the way we think about things.
Yeah, we think it's so important. I mean, dogs are not there performing tests to find out if humans, if only we could have better olfaction. They're not like trying to publish in dog journals, to try and upgrade the perception of our ability to sense stuff. It's just like we tortuously sort of try to, make them like us. Can they please be like us? And they are in important ways.
Well, that again takes us back to the culture cluster, where you say sort of, well, imagine a world ruled by dogs, and they're trying to deal with the humans. Right. And if you ever lose your temper, then you're gone. Yeah,
capital offense. Yeah, don't argue.
So it's neat, and it's what I find inspirational. When you find these things, you just think, that's amazing. Yeah. And that has all sorts of implications. And again, it's another reason why we just have to hold back from physically punishing these animals, because they're making, the other thing I think about dogs. Now, this is okay. So this is where I've got to be careful, because I said something to one of the students this week, and then she picked me up on it. And because I was reading stuff and thinking, no, you mentioned it as well. Dogs wanting to please. Now hear me out before you jump in. I can see your eyes just flashed. So in a casual way, I talk about dogs wanting to please their owner. Dogs, they want to please because it's in their, they do what's in their best interest, and actually if you can predict what your human wants, that works.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
They want to please us insofar as the operations that tend to please us tend to result in good things for dogs.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, they will want to do things because if you are part of their social group, it is good for their social group as well. And, just from a pure...
For us to be happy?
And I'm not saying about being happy. It pays off for the group, and it doesn't have to be happiness. It just pays off. If if we are successful in this task, that potentially has advantages in being adaptive. But it doesn't mean they're reading their owners and saying, I want to make you happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this kind of, people, the whole pleasing thing, because it marginalizes normal dogs and ends up in horrific abuse. Because the ones who don't want to please are miscreants.
Yeah.
If they don't, what about if they do want to please us so well, and then they do something and you say, I'm well pleased, and then they, and they fail to sort of, it fails to sort of, make behavior increase, then, there's just so many, deadly alleys that's going to lead us.
So, okay, I'm going to go.
Aside from being probably untrue.
So I've got Clive Wynne lined up for one of these as
Oh,
well.
good.
I know Clive very well. And, and I'm going to be
Oh, God, I love him.
Yeah. But his book, Dog is Love, it was a real surprise, because here is Clive, a die-hard behaviorist who suddenly produces this book all about dogs loving. And I'm going to ask him about his transition point on that. But I mean, have you read the book?
I've not read it in its entirety, but I have it and I've looked through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to actually. I did say to Clive that I might do it between Christmas and New Year, but I want, Clive, if you're listening to this, I haven't finished reading the book, and I want to finish reading the book before I'd have the chat with you.
Good.
I mean, I love Clive, and I know him very well, and but yeah, this sort of.
It is a curious sort of offering from him.
Yeah, but I just wonder if it's more about the social group rather than the particular relationship. Now, I got into all sorts of hot water because we did some work where we suggested that cats did not have a secure attachment with their owners, and I started getting messages telling me to die and whatever. My cat loves me, how dare you, and this, that, and the other. And if we now start to say this about dogs, we're going to end up with lots of dislikes on this YouTube video, I'm afraid. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that dogs aren't loyal and things like that, but it's what's going through their mind, I think, is the key thing that people have to understand. And they make us feel good, and we make dogs feel good as well, and that's a great thing. But
I think the key thing is their welfare. So their physical welfare, of course, and everybody sort of can plug into that. That they should have shelter and food and veterinary care, and but I think the mental and emotional welfare of dogs is something that I think for me that's where it's at. And is insofar as cognition research, well performed, contributes to that, I'll happily fund it. But if it's just for the sake of, wow, you're curious, I think curiosity is great too, but I think we've got bigger fish to fry. We need to get people to stop physically torturing dogs. It would be nice, wouldn't it?
So imagine I won the lottery and I said, Jean, what experiment should I do? What should I go and do you think? Just out of interest. Have you got any thoughts?
Find either some sort of earwear for sound sensitivity that works. Drug. Yeah,
I might be doing some of that.
Imagine the patent. Imagine coming up with the design of earplugs that works on dogs enough to dent the sound sensitive.
So there is mechanical. We're doing some work at the moment, and they've developed some stuff for the military dogs. Because these dogs have to go into a firefight.
Yeah, I mean, we can buy. I mean, I can purchase foam earplugs for pittance that block out. I don't know exactly. It's 30 dB or something. And make me able to sleep through. New Year's Eve. Why can't dog ear canals are not that different? How can can't we come up with something?
Yeah, no, we
that would be one thing, and then and then some way to look into modes of communication. So how can we better get through to owners? How can we message You know, how, you know, because I think it's a lot of the stuff we already know, you know. I mean, you said, again, at this, the last conference, I mean, you said something that which really struck me, that's, and probably because it, you know, it's confirmation, but it confirmed something that I've always thought, which is that if you're using positive reinforcement, by definition, you're using negative punishment at the same time, because you're not reinforcing every bloody thing the dog does. And every single time the dog expects to be rewarded and you don't, he's been negatively punished, you know. And I think it's less of a boogeyman than current fashion has it to be.
Well,
But the amount to which people will still, you see it every day. And this is 2021. I live in a very progressive area of the world, and you see people jerking dogs around, you know, jerking dogs around on their, even if it's a flat collar, they're still jerking the dog around. If the dog's not on a prong or a choke collar, you see people being sort of just sort of rushing their dogs and being unkind, not letting them sniff, you know, forcing them here, you know, into this, you go over here, you go, and you know, and you know, how can we get those people to empathize better?
I think, you know, in relation to that, and this is something which, for me personally, through this whole pandemic, I'm incredibly busy, but I have sort of learned to slow down. I've done much more macro photography, and you have to be slow for that. You know, you're trying to get really small things in focus or little angles on things.
Yeah.
And I feel so much better for it. I really
It's
enjoy
meditative
that
in a
aspect.
way, isn't it?
It is. And this, and you're quite right. People are just rushing the whole time. They're not giving the dog the chance to do things.
Sniff.
I think dogs can process things incredibly quickly, but the thing is, when it comes to things like smell, they can process it quickly, but there's a ton more information there for them than there is us.
The amount of time that they want to smell, to spend on a site lets us know that.
Yeah. Just, you know, so what if it's going to take them an extra 10 seconds? You know?
Right. The walk isn't about mileage covered.
Exactly.
You know, And how can we get people to let their dogs sniff?
Actually, yesterday I was at there's a new society probably going to be launched on veterinary humanities. Those are people who, and the first question they asked everybody is, what do you think veterinary humanities is about? There is actually there is a journal, Frontiers in Veterinary Science, and they have a humanities division, but nothing that they publish pretty much is anything to do with humanities. It's social sciences. But you know, one of the things about the humanities is, and this was one of the things that came out, they talk about, you know, wicked problems. Wicked problems don't have simple solutions.
Yeah.
So, you know, COVID is a wicked problem because you know, even with a vaccine, you potentially select for strains that are resistant.
We're going to end up having to do it every year
and whatever. But you know, they just asked us about the different types of wicked problems, and I sort of said, well, you know, one of the issues is this issue of communication with clients. So, you know, people are concerned about certain breeds of dogs, and a traditional scientist will say, well, you know, owners who take a dog with a short nose that can't breathe properly, you know, they don't understand that the dogs are suffering. If they understood the dogs were suffering, they wouldn't do it.
Right.
That
as opposed to they think it's charming and endearing.
Well, that is purely a rational explanation and completely misses the point. Because and if you say to people who you know, who like those sorts of dogs, these dogs are suffering, struggling to breathe, then all they hear is, yes, these dogs are struggling to breathe, they need to be cared for, I'm somebody who loves them and cares for them, therefore I need to go and get more of them because I need to look up. And so you get exactly the opposite. And this is why, and this is what the humanities can actually bring to it, is understanding that actually it's not, you know, we are not just mechanical little robots. There is much more to it. And it's these sorts of issues.
Are you aware of the amount of vitriol you get if you try and broach that topic with breeders?
Oh God, yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, you should see the amount of vitriol we get because of the work we do on shock collars.
No, that I'm familiar with. You know, it was news to me when, you know, somebody said, you know, if you suggest, you know, or even, it doesn't matter what kind of evidence you put forward, that, you know, you know, a pug bred to standard, in other words, a well-bred pug, is something that just shouldn't happen. That's a moral offense. They get really, really aggressive.
Mm. Oh, yeah. But again, to understand those problems, you've got to step out of just the purely rational and think that everything in the world is rational. Actually, we do
Yeah.
operate on a very
Yeah.
emotional level, and you,
Yeah.
as I said, and it explains why you get the exact opposite effect, that when you come up with a campaign to try and stop this, and
Yeah,
yeah,
you
it
think you're
gets
doing
worse.
good. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird one. I have it written down as a proposal somewhere about how we could test some of these ideas, but I've yet to find funding for it. But I might, if I get a self-funding student, go and send it
Mm.
their way, because, as I said, it makes some nice predictions, and I think it has enormous implications, yeah, for getting those messages across to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, we're lucky if we work with dogs, because dogs are quite simple. As you say, if you can be
Yeah.
consistent in the message you're giving to them, then they
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, and it's a finite number of things that we want them to do and not do. It's not, we don't need everything. We just need certain critical things. And that's why I think, the book that you did with Helen on puppies nailed it, because I mean, I think the biggest thing it did was it cut through the noise and said, these are the things to focus on with
Yeah.
puppies, which is not on that list, or a bunch of things that you'll often see in the curricula of people's classes.
Yeah.
Which just makes me very, very, because it's so vital that we get it right, because it's such an opportunity at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you just set them up on the right path, it's so much easier. And the life skills idea, if it's now being taken up by people like guide dogs, and yeah, they need different skills, but you just set them up, and it is just that so much easier. And things that people think, oh well, he's always been like that, it's genetic, and that's the thing which I find sad, when people label the dog, and therefore everything that the dog does operates through that label. And they use it as an excuse. So there's
Inaction.
well, that's a bit hard on people to say they use it as an excuse. They end up convinced they can do nothing for it.
Right.
Whereas if you understand, what goes on in socialization, and what socialize is, and as much what it isn't, if you got the unsocialized dog, you just have to realize that if you approach it like a socialized dog, you're going to make matters worse. Yeah.
Right.
But if you think that because he's past his socialization period, he's
All
done
bets are
for,
off.
you think, no, there's an
No.
enormous amount that you can
And
do.
also, you can't turn back the clock. You can't
Yeah.
change his genetic. I mean, Dunbar said this very well. Team genetics, that's outgone. The horse is out of the barn with regard to early experience or maternal behavior and so on.
Yeah.
So what do you have left? And what you have left is, you better get cracking on it, because that's what you've got now. Now, I have to say, caveat to that is, I spend a good deal of my time coaching dog trainers. And one of the, sort of very, very ugly things is burnout. Is a high burnout profession, as is veterinary medicine. And dog trainers being made the mop-up squad for when team genetics didn't really try very hard, and team breeder didn't really try very hard with the litter, etc. And then team owner consumed the wrong sources, and then the good dog trainer gets brought in, and now fix. There's a lot of burnout implication for us being in the mop-up squad role, and that's something that it worries me, because every time we lose a good trainer, and there are a lot of crack trainers out there, so every time we lose a good one, it's that all the future dogs that trainer could have helped is gone down. So that's something that does keep me up at night, is trainer welfare.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, you do hear it a lot of time. And
so they've got to be able to vent, so yes, this is what's left to you, and you've got to be pragmatic, and you've got to now do what you can, but also, it's safe to vent, and you were handed kind of a raw, not a very good hand of cards here.
And I think it's yeah, and it's that important to recognize that, yeah, where you're coming in, and therefore, you're not expected to be Superman or Superwoman.
But they are.
But they put that pressure on themselves, I think.
Yeah,
if
well,
there's
and sometimes owners,
Yeah. Yeah, but if they spend the time with the owners explaining where we are,
yeah,
and
yes,
and that's the thing. If we stick with the unsocialized dog, it is so easy to just keep shoving the dog down that wrong path.
yeah,
That's why you have to spend the time with the owner to get them on board, to understand it, so that it's better to do nothing than the wrong thing. Just leave the dog, let the dog live in another part of the house if needs be, as we work on this issue, and we can turn it around. And I know that the trainers that you worked with at the San Francisco SPCA, you had dogs that were fighting dogs that had a lot of experience of fighting, and I'm not, you don't blame the dog, but you turned some of those dogs around to actually.
I mean, you're largely sort of a researcher to see, can we do it? And then is it prohibitive given the resources? Is it a good allocation of resources, etc.?
But I think
there's bigger questions.
Yeah, but I think the key thing is you showed it can be done.
And
it can be done long term. That's the key thing.
Yes.
No, you should. I'm not saying you take a fighting pit bull and you go and put it with a family with a 2-year-old kid and everything's going to be fine. But the key thing is it sends that message that you can, there is hope for these animals. Now, I'm not saying we can save every single one. But in the right hands.
Right. And that's so key, in the right hands. We have this thing called the living with a dog trainer effect, very elegant phrase, which means that, dog trainers who do board and train, and the owner will say, here's my laundry list of problems, can you please fix these? And the particular method of delivery is a board and train. So the trainer is going to take the dog for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, work on the dog, and then dog goes back to the owner and we're going to transfer the stuff over. That's how it works in theory. Now in practice, aside from sort of the transfer issue, one of the things that sometimes comes up is they're living with the dog trainer, and after a few days living with the dog trainer, some of the stuff never manifests. So it becomes difficult to work on it because it evaporated because of just the basic day-to-day quality of life and structure and welfare and so on. And that's something I've always wanted to sort of look into. So what, how can we get metrics? So what exactly is that dog? Can we itemize? What does it mean, this living with a dog trainer effect? Like, what specifically is going on? So without dedicated behavior modification, why did this happen or that happen or the other happen? And some of that, it doesn't always happen, and it only happens for some things some of the time. But when it does happen, why?
But I think a lot of that is down to consistency. The dog can now start to make predictions.
Right. Yeah. And the dog being protected from wrong choices, and the dog being and the dog being giving clear information and not having scary stuff happen to him, and also, I have to say, also just basic enrichment. That as soon as you're living with the dog trainer gets up in the morning and the dog gets exercise, and the dog has probably other dogs to interact with, and probably has to solve some problems, and then gets trained on what, some other task. And so, kind of Nicholas Dodman's, a tired dog is a good dog. So the dog's not warehoused. It could be that, or that could be part of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's just so much that, and a lot of it is quite simple, but the skill is making it simple.
And then undoing sort of the kind of wrong-headed paradigms that are interfering. If only people would sort of view things in terms of basic respondent and operant conditioning, as opposed to coup attempts and so on, mentalizing all the stuff that dogs do, and that's tough. I've been at it for 30 odd years. And it's still tough, it's now maybe, I'm saying 30 years, oh my God, that's really an eye blink in terms of idea shifts in society.
Yeah, but I think we've come a long way in 30 years.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think, I do think we are turning a corner. I just realized, we went straight into something, and I guess this is what we do, because we just chat, and I hope people could keep up with.
We pinged around a little bit. Yeah.
I usually ask people nice questions like, how did you get into dogs? Let's go back to the beginning. Tell me about your early experience. 'Cause I don't know your early experiences with dogs and whatever, or how you got into dogs.
More interesting is how I got into chows. So like,
I was going to ask you about that.
Oh yeah. See, I think, so I like most trainers and possibly many veterinarians were not a big fan of chows. I know too many people who got badly nailed and so on, and just the whole idea of them, and they were not fun to train and so on, and anyway, and then I just I had a foster puppy, I figured it was a safe foster puppy because it's a chow and there's no way would I ever bond to it. Therefore, ended up screening about it, but oh my God, and it turned out to be the best dog ever. And that one dog changed me from hatred of a breed to devotion of resources towards helping that breed. To have one individual change your mind on a breed, because dog trainers, we can be very breedist. We love pit bulls, but we don't like some of the Asian breeds and so on, and now I'm like all about chows, and then it sort of bled out. Now I kind of very much like Shibas, and I like Lhasa Apsos, and Akitas are great, and from I don't like them to I love them, one individual, because now I see them all, it's a funny thing.
So one of the things when I've chatted with people,
what do you think of chows?
I don't encounter them these days. It's weird. I cannot remember the last time.
But do you like them?
The last chow I can remember was when I was in general practice, which was 1994.
Wow.
That's what, 27 years ago?
26, 7 years
removing a melanoma from its tongue. It got a tumor on its tongue.
That's what my chow died of.
It's quite common because when you get melanomas on the non-hairy areas, they're often malignant. In fact, that would have been when I was with the PDSA, so that would have been before 1993.
So going on 30 years.
I can't think this is going to.
But in theory,
have I ever consulted? I'm just wondering, have I ever consulted a behavior case with the chow?
Right. I think partly that's because the chow people, they know
what have anything to do with me.
I find that with the Jack Russell people too. The Jack Russell people are pretty good. I mean, these are complicated little machines. But the Jack Russell crowd, I find, unlike we were talking about, I wish the pug breeders would, but the Jack Russell people I find are very upfront. About, it's going to make you crazy, and it's going to do this, it's going to do this, ha ha ha. They're and so people who get them, they know what to expect, and so they don't present themselves as often as and this is my own pet hypothesis, by the way. I don't know if it's true. So you don't know whether you like chows because you have
I've
data.
met them in practice, and it wouldn't be a breed that I would go for.
But you don't hate them.
No, I don't hate them at all.
Okay.
I can't think of any breed of dog that I hate. I mean, it's
really?
interesting. Some of my, I don't think that I'm not like that. I honestly, I can't think of a breed of dog that. I would say that
if you could wave a wand, you'd sort of wipe off the face of the earth, or say nobody can get anyone anymore.
No, I don't think there's any breed like that. There's some people I'd do that to, but not the dogs. So I've sort of, again, with lockdown, I've been thinking, do I get a dog? And people always find it weird that I've not got a dog, but because I travel so much.
Shouldn't you have 4?
Yeah, but I have them at work.
So if you're going to get one, what would you get?
So, well, this is the thing. So, I love pugs, but I won't get a pug because of the problems and whatever. And I do.
Would you get one that had a little?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm a complete sucker for all of those features that they do, and I look at a pug and I think, oh God, I do love you.
Yeah.
But you're screwing with my brain. You're tapping into my emotional brain. I got to be rational about this.
But pugs are very appealing. I mean, there's just no way around it.
And when I grew up, well, I grew up with a miniature Dachshund, Jack Russell,
love mini
Labrador,
Dachshunds.
Springers, and a lady who lived a couple of doors down had a pug, a little black pug called Penny. And my dad was a vet. I can just remember that, and I loved Penny. She's such a cute little, this little pug, and this we're now talking sort of 1970s, and I remember though one Sunday she turns up with her pug with her eye popped out.
Oh yeah,
my dad had to put it back, and this was before we had the real.
That's really alarming.
I still love them though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Pugs. But yeah, I don't know how it came out, but
but you wouldn't get one. You want one, but you wouldn't get one.
So
it would slow you down.
So I mean, I've been chatting with my wife about it, and I have probably a medium-sized dog. I love Springers and Cockers.
Yeah. Small Chow is kind of the a small Chow is the size of a Springer.
Yeah. My youngest son, he's 18. He really likes that Shiba Inus.
I see you with a Shiba.
You think I could? Well, I better not tell him that. Mind you, he's going to be editing this talk, so
you would do brilliantly.
I can see the attraction.
And they're very healthy.
Yeah.
Look,
Well, that's the other thing. Even as a vet, I couldn't afford to have a pug. I mean,
even if you did everything yourself.
Well, yeah. But don't get me down that line, because I'm sure Thomas will be starting to say, "Well, Dad, maybe you should. You're in lockdown. You're going to be in lockdown for another year."
If ever you did pull the trigger and get a Shiba, I want to talk to you like 2 years later, and I bet you're going to say best thing I ever did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully it won't be 2 years before I speak to you. Let's speak to you a little bit more often.
The experiment in terms of you. You have to, 2 years you've been with the Shiba for 2 years.
No, I could see me getting into a Shiba. It's just that I don't have the so the earliest dog. This is sort of my dog life story. As I said, Heidi was the little miniature Dachshund, and she always ruled the roost, regardless of what else we had. And then there was Amber, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My 2 brothers were born first, then my 2 sisters, then there was my mum actually lost one, and then I came the next year. So my mum, people say, "Oh God, how do you cope with 2 kids at that age?" She said, "Well, I've got another 3 at home." But so my brothers played with each other, my sisters played with each other, and I had the dogs. And my mum told me that even almost as soon as I could walk, Amber and I were inseparable. And I have a few memories of Amber, but I used to ride her like a horse. And my mum said, "Yeah, you let her do that." Now the sad point is, my dad ended up putting Amber down for biting a lady in a wheelchair.
Right.
That was the solution. So that's probably, that may be the reason why I've ended up doing what I'm doing. I don't know, that experience. And I do wonder now, though, even though I was only a very small kid, did Amber have a bad back because I was sitting on her?
Gosh.
I don't know
mustn't go there.
I don't know. But it is what it is. But I still, I do love Cocker Spaniels. I very, very nearly went for one.
Yeah, I think they're very underrated. They're much less popular than they used to be, and they ought to be more popular.
Yeah. But do you go for the American or the more classic?
I like them all.
Yeah.
I never met a Cocker I didn't like. It can be crap breeding, can have big cherry eye, be ungroomed, and it's like, I love you. I'll fix you.
So the thing is, if I get a dog, then I won't go traveling as much. I know that.
But is that
that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing at all. Yeah. But it's I just think, well, I turn 55 this year. I get a dog, that's going to see me through till I'm 70. Yeah. I'm going to be old.
About that too. Yeah, I calculate. So how many dogs do I have left?
Yeah. So, but I don't know. How long do Shibas live for?
You can, they live a good 15 years. But you get a dog, get a house sitter. You know, if there's nobody at home to look after the dog, you just get a dog sitter and you can travel.
Yeah. I don't know.
You can have it all.
It's a bit bizarre, you know. So yeah, I was going to say,
Especially
I wouldn't want to leave the dog, but then I was thinking, I leave my wife. That's terrible. But she's happy with that. She's got the horses. But
yeah.
So
yeah, if she can have horses, you can have a Shiba.
Ooh, don't. This like.
Okay,
going to go
okay,
mad. She's going to say, "You're not doing any more of these podcasts if you come back with a dog."
You can end up with like.
So well, I had a great time, and by the way, I have just gone and invested in a Shiba. I don't know. Yeah, so something like that. As I say, staffies I love as well.
Yeah. Oh, English staffies, you mean?
Yeah.
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 A little tank.
Yeah.
Delicious.
They're pretty indestructible if you get them right.
Bowling ball.
So what have you got at the moment, dog-wise?
I got a sort of a Maltese Yorkie mix type thing. Little mini. I always wanted, like when I was a child, the first dog I ever wanted was a miniature long-haired dachshund. I saw in a pet store window, miniature long-haired dachshund puppy, and it was like, oh my God, I so want this. But my dad wouldn't let me have one until I was 11, and he said, you can have a dog, but it has to be a Doberman. So I said, sold. But I didn't want it. I never wanted a big dog. And then the first husband, the only breed we could agree on was Border Collies. It worked out fine because I was doing sports. And then the Chow, and now little Brian, the Maltese Yorkie. That's what I always wanted, a little dog. So finally,
little dogs.
I'm just a little older than you, and I've got my little dog. It took me that long to get it. So if you want your Shiba, don't be wasting time. You know.
But that's the other thing. Little dogs. I mean, some of them have really great. I love the character. I love the character of little.
This way, he's bred he's bred to sort of sit in laps and absorb patting. Like holy crap, you know?
Yeah.
And you just take care of I make sure he brushes teeth, and he could like possibly outlive me.
I do think it'd be really cool to be able to sort of go places with your dog in your pocket.
Yeah.
I love that idea as well.
Yeah, and it fits everywhere. It's very.
Anyway, we probably ought to we better talk about something that other people might be.
We could cut this. You can cut this out.
No, we won't. We'll leave it. It'll be there. Don't worry. So yeah. Okay. So that's how you got into dogs.
Chows.
Oh, chows. Yeah. So how did you get into dogs then?
I always was fascinated by dogs. Just always was. Simple as that.
So what moved you from sort of the competitive world into the shelter world, though?
Partly I think it was some, these things you rarely like a moment that's just sort of like you're climbing the same mountain again and again as you rack up titles in sports. It really is the same mountain again and again and again and again. There's also the wear and tear of, dog shows every weekend and classes during the week, and you travel to the dog show and it's fantastic amounts of boredom for your, 5 minutes of incredible stress. Especially if you're campaigning dogs. And then there was, and it wasn't bringing out the best in me. I thought I was doing the world this fantastic service by training dogs non-aversively and competing successfully in dog sports. And then one of my dogs was competing, and there's one little exercise where they have to sort of go over a jump and then go neatly in front of you. And she's a dog who tended, was a very good winner. She was winning a lot, and she was so enthusiastic that she ticked the jump, basically just sort of a little, as she went over the jump. And I got docked 5 points, which I thought was unfair. And it wrecked my day. And I was all fuming. And the obedience competitors, I would have had my score that I would have had I not had that unfair docking. And and that hit me that, my day is wrecked because some judge took off 5 points. Like, this is what I'm spending my time doing, when dogs are suffering all over the place. And it really was, it was very little competing after that. I migrated to animal welfare and pet dogs because it just was a poor use of human resources. I don't want to bash anybody who does sports. I think it's terrific fun. But in terms of
really interesting
dog welfare.
It reminds me of my me supporting my soccer team, and I think, you know, we go to a match and they lose, and you think, why have I just spent this money and getting all the way to London to go and watch Arsenal, only to be disappointed like this and absolutely gutted? And you think, why do I do this? But I don't know. But,
oh my God, when your team loses, oh my God, yeah.
But anyway, okay, yeah. So that's yeah. So it's that emotional thing, isn't it? It's but that's a big step. So one of the things
it's time consuming. I mean, training dogs up to the standards where you're going to, you know, effectively compete in these sports, it eats a lot of time.
Yeah, that's true. And that I don't think I'd get into that side of it. I'm just not competitive, because I know I'm not going to win, so I just don't bother trying.
So I can be. So it brought out that sort of in me. Like you know, it wasn't just enough to show up and I wanted to win. You know, I had this, you know, these dogs had to do well. They had to I wanted to get this score, that, you know, and then, you know, when I left it all behind, you know,
and that's the way it should be. Just enjoy it, you know, and that's what people need to do. Enjoy your dog.
Right.
Yeah. Enjoy it, you know, you say focus on what makes you happy, what makes the dog happy as well.
Precisely.
But I mean, one of the one of the sort of joys of doing these things is you know, just getting to chat with people as well. But a recurring thing that comes out, and I love doing these, and I've been so lucky that actually I can just phone up so many people and just have a chat like this. And, you know,
especially in lockdown, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you know, we've been chatting 90 minutes, I think, already, but it just, so, but, you know, there's that. I've been incredibly lucky and I've bumbled through and whatever, but just chatting to all of the people that I have done, so many of them also, you know, there but for the grace of God, you know, go I. And you know, those sorts of moments of it could have gone all differently. You must have had some as well.
Yeah.
And I don't want to pry, but but I am going to. Actually, no, that's a lie. I do want to pry, but I don't want to make you feel...
I mean, I was sort of on course to either become a musician or to stay in school forever. In 1990, when I had a gangrenous appendix at an Ian Dunbar seminar. It was my first Ian Dunbar seminar. And he, you know, and I remember him saying, he was talking about, and at the time I was sort of heavily embroiled in dog sports. He said, trying to force healing in a dog that doesn't even want to follow you is too stupid for words. And it was like, bing. And I, you know, I'd been ill, but I was glad that I traveled to that seminar. Anyway, I ended up very, very ill, 5 weeks in hospital and, you know, and obstructions, and nearly died twice, and et cetera, et cetera. But for that, I probably would have just ended up an academic or a musician or something. And it was then that I said, no, I'm going to help dogs. And, you know, so I very much credit Ian Dunbar for that. I took 12, I don't know how I did it. I only attended one day of the seminar before I couldn't get off my hotel room floor, but I took 12 pages of notes, and it was very inspirational, and it was entirely about pet dogs. And it was one of the bricks in the wall of sport. Pet dogs, help dogs, stop trying to just rack up ribbons and plaques.
Yeah, no, that's
So I advise, I wouldn't, you know, you don't want to wish people to be ill, but you do want to wish people to have moments of clarity and epiphany where you do have to say, okay, so what do I really want to do? And it really was me thinking, if I get to live, this is what I'm going to do. And I did get to live, and that's what I did. And so it you know, it clarifies the resolve, it lights the fire under you, all that kind of stuff. So it was a, you know, on the whole, you know, in retrospect, you know, a good turning point.
Yeah, it is. It is strange, isn't it? Because there are just so many. Yeah.
Oh, you're in your 20s. You're piddling. You're pissing around. You don't know what you're doing. You know, you know, and
yeah. And well, yeah, I mean, Ian was somebody that, I went to a lot of his seminars in the 80s when I could. And I actually, for whatever reason, and again, you know, thinking about it, I went to Ian. So I saw practice with Roger Mugford, because he's about the only person doing it in this country. And then he gave me this list of people in the States to go and visit, and Ian was on that list. And I wrote to Ian and I said, look, I'd like to come to the States in my before my final year at vet school and whatever.
I was gonna say you were not a newly minted vet, you were still in school.
Yeah. And Ian sort of obviously wrote back and said, yeah, you can come and stay with me. And but he also said, I'm doing these, he must have said, you know, I'm doing these seminars in the UK, come along to them. And I think I'm just thinking about it. I'm not sure I've ever paid to go to one of Ian's seminars.
Did you have interest in behavior?
Yeah, no, that was the thing. That was the reason why, you know, I mean, I struggled through vet school. I just found it so mind-numbingly boring to just learn this. And then at the end of 5 years, you're allowed to apply it. And when we started to have the behavior lectures, it was this, there isn't an answer. You have to think about this. And I thought this was brilliant. This is why everybody else in our year hated it for that reason.
Right.
And you know, I guess, you know, I'd always been interested in welfare, and it sort of came together and just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And actually next week I'm phoning up Sarah Heath, and Sarah and I were at vet school together. She was a couple of years above me. And, you know, I went down the academic, nobody, I tell you, at university, nobody thought I would end up as the academic. So
yeah, it's just but you know, the contributions you make, you know, it's kind of a good thing.
But I like the academic life. I like the security of it, to be honest.
Oh, and also, you know, and answering questions, you know.
Yeah, and well, yeah, as I said, I like being paid for making mistakes and learning as a result of it. You know, that's what it means to be an academic. And you know, not being afraid to say, okay, that didn't work, or what do we learn from this?
Yes, well, it's being a healthy academic, you know. I'm not sure everybody approaches it in a healthy manner, though, you know.
Well, I think I also have a short attention span, so I get bored with the topic quite quickly. So, you know, I've had 20 plus, I think, PhD students, but they've virtually all done something different because, right, okay, you can go in with that. And then if you want, you can forge your career on that. I'm going to go.
You're not a coffee drinker, are you?
No, I used to be. And then this was when I was in practice, I was thinking, oh, I've got a muscle twitch. And I was thinking, no, that's not a muscle twitch. That's your heart, actually. And so I took home, this is with the PDSA, and we had an ECG, which had crocodile clips that we used on the dogs. And I brought that home and I thought, you know, I'll just check. And I put it on. And after that, I thought, I'm never putting this on a conscious dog. You know, this hurts.
Oh, right. It's
and okay, I didn't have a fur coat and whatever, but it was so painful. But yeah, and I thought, no, you've got dysrhythmia. And I saw the doctor and they said, you know,
could it be coffee?
Well, they said cut down on the coffee, and they disappeared. And you know, I've started to drink tea again over the last, well, quite a long time now. But yeah, so that's
much less.
So for those reasons, but yeah, do not try and do an ECG with crocodile clips on yourself, is my advice. But again, learned something from it. But yeah, so I you know, I started off in practice, and I'm not one of these vets who went into academia because I hated practice. I absolutely loved practice. I started off with an animal charity that did this free veterinary care, and the joy of that was you couldn't refer anything. So if you couldn't do it, or one of your colleagues couldn't do it, that was it. Now, you know, it was a great training ground. It was, and you know, had some great colleagues there. But the thing that really struck me was so much of this actually could be prevented with education. And I was doing behavior work, but it wasn't just the behavior work. You know, I was doing obesity clinics, I was doing flea stuff as well. And that just got me interested in teaching people. And I just, I do like these chats, you know, I've learned so much tonight. Now I'm so glad, you know, this has been such a great chat.
Oh, I've enjoyed this too.
And you know that I'm glad we're doing it on a Friday night, because I do some of them earlier in the week. I know I just don't sleep that night because I'm buzzing
Yeah,
after
yeah,
them.
he gets
So I don't
yeah,
have
yeah,
that
yeah.
to tonight. It doesn't matter if I don't sleep, because it's Saturday. So where was I going? I don't know. I've forgotten. It's getting
Uh,
late. I finished my wine. You can't remember
EEG
because you
clip.
weren't listening.
Crocodile EEG
Yeah,
clip
no.
or
Yeah,
EKG
so
clip.
yeah, so teaching people, and yeah, just move. So and there was a Robert Hind. So Robert Hind gave a lecture in Bristol on the interdependence of the behavior sciences, and
Mm,
I went to it.
mm.
It absolutely blew my mind,
Oh,
and I came out of it, and I thought,
what are the
I don't know who this guy is. You know, I didn't know who he
yeah.
was at that time. I nicked the post and I wrote to him this letter, and I said to him, went to your lecture tonight. It was absolutely brilliant. I'm a vet. I'm interested in behavior. What should I do with my life? Basically, on a sheet of paper like that, you know, as a student would in those days. And I got this beautiful handwritten 4-page letter back, signed by Robert Hind. And as I said, I had no idea who Robert Hind was in those days. And as I started to read, I thought, oh my God, you know, this guy's really important. And it just struck me that this guy
It
took the
took the
time and he said,
right.
it's really important that vets are working in behavior. And, you know, he said, I didn't talk about them, but for this reason and that reason.
Oh, brilliant.
And I told this story to one of my friends who actually was, who did her PhD at Cambridge. He said that was so typical of Robert. He was like that with everybody. Even to the day he retired, he would rehearse every lecture that he did because every word was important.
Wow.
Well, when I moved into academia, and I got the chair here, and you know, I could remember that he wasn't very young when I was at vet school, and I thought, well, I wonder if he's still alive. And I thought, well, I haven't seen an obituary. So
Mm.
I wrote to him and said, you won't remember me, but 20 years ago, I wrote to you as a student at vet school, and I said sort of basically, what should I do with my life? And you know, you took the time, whatever. And I just wanted to first of all say thank you, and you know, I'm now taking up the first chair in Europe in this discipline, and I can trace it back to that lecture. And you know, I have to give an inaugural address. If you wish to come to it, I'm allowed VIP tickets. You know, we can arrange for you to come, etc. And whatever. Well, again, him being him, he wrote me a beautiful letter back,
Oh,
and he'd clearly, you know, and he'd clearly gone onto the internet to find out more about me than, you know, and he said, you know, it's just wrote some lovely, completely undeserving things about me. He said, unfortunately, I can't make that date because I've got a hospital appointment, but do you think you could get it videoed? And so, of course, we videoed it and sent it to him. And not long after that, Don Broom retired at Cambridge, and I got to meet him after. And again, he's such a nice guy.
right.
But he said in the second letter that he wrote to me, he said, one of the joys of teaching is you never know who you're inspiring or what you're inspiring them to.
Yeah. And that
And
you
I
let him know so that he, you know, he got
yeah,
some
you know,
feedback.
and that's the thing. There are some people you teach and you think, yeah, they're going to be high flyers at whatever, but
Mm.
actually a lot of the joy sometimes really comes in unexpected places.
Yeah.
So you know, I've when I first moved into academia, I seem to have a lot of students who were dyslexic, and they were very smart, but their grades at school didn't reflect their ability. And I can remember one of them saying sort of, and she did a really nice piece of work, and I said, we're going to publish this, and we did. And she said, oh, well, will I, you know, will I be named at all? And I said, yeah, you're going to be one of the authors. And she said, well, can I get a copy of it? And I said, yeah, of course. And she said, because my teachers at school said I'd never achieve anything. And I just think, and that, you know, and that to me was a
Oh,
real
God.
light bulb moment, because we've been talking about dogs, but again, in education, you know, people's confidence is often beaten out of them. And, you
Destroyed.
know, because of some, you know, they've got a problem like dyslexia or something like that, or, you know, they might have problems at home, who knows? And, you know, we're not set up. So it's about, far
Some
more than
teacher's
the
saying
dogs.
that to some kid,
Yeah, and you just think, it's really, it's really sad. And you know, I've done some great work with people like that, and yeah, it doesn't need to hold you back. You just have to focus on the positive. We've got very serious, and we've gone
Yeah.
completely off dogs, so people have probably swithed off by now.
Yeah, but that was a great
But
story,
but
man.
yeah, but as I said,
He
so
took
I've
the
always
time.
thought if somebody like Sir Robert Hind, who
Yeah.
you know, who is the person who brought psychology and ethology together, as far as I'm
And he's such a
concerned,
great guy.
if he could give me the time of day, you know, that's, and you know, I think it's so important, and it's just but yeah, who knows? But it's those sorts of moments that are, I think, really important.
Brilliant that, I mean, you're paying it forward with, you know, students like your dyslexic student. I mean, it's just a good ripple.
But yeah, as I said, that somebody like that, there's so much satisfaction, you know, and I didn't never thought about that, but yeah, that was transformative for her.
Yeah.
That sort of point, and you think, oh, you know, we were just working together, and I just treated you like a normal person, you know.
Right.
But everyone said, oh, well, you're dyslexic, and you know, they treat them differently. And it's like the dogs, isn't it? You know, somebody says, oh, that's an unsocialized dog, you know,
Right.
and they treat them differently. That's a fighting breed. They treat it differently, and the dog then, you know, is doomed to failure. And that's the sad thing. And that I think is that what we've got to try and do. As you said earlier, everybody, whether you're a dog or a human, you're an individual. Let's work with it. Let's try and work with the potential.
What you've got.
Yeah. And let's bring out the best in them all. Isn't that a good point at which probably to finish? Because we've been chatting for a long time. Before we finish, though, okay. So, what have you read recently that you think would be? Actually, no. Let's ask you this: what's the most influential doggy book that you've read, just out of interest?
Has to be a dog book?
No. Well, but influenced you as a dog person, so it doesn't have to be a dog book. No. You can tell me other books that influenced you in other ways, but
I would say The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, because
okay,
it took me down the path of evolutionary biology, which I ended up doing graduate work in, and evolutionary psychology, got me thinking about brains, to supplement the behaviorism that I sort of you know born and bred with so there's some programming already in there. Interesting. How does that work? And then, you know, it's such a mind-blowing topic that I don't know. And I think it's more in this country than in the UK. But the shallow and flawed understanding of evolution in this country is criminal. You know, and the actual frank political antipathy towards it is just so puzzling. You know, it's something that should be taught, you know, kind of like cognitive biases to all high school students. You know, it's basically selective breeding, you know, and that it matters, you know, right down to this capacity, all these capacities to learn that we have, that we've been talking about, are all evolved tools. You know, and how does that work? You know?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing I like about actually not being in a vet school, is I'm surrounded by biologists, and they're constantly saying it doesn't make sense unless it makes sense in an evolutionary terms, and they constantly challenge. And that's
cornerstone of biology.
And that is what has influenced the way.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I like you know, I like, you know, evolution's obviously very big picture biology. I mean, I like molecular biology. I like microbiology. I like the focusing, and I like, you know, organisms. Of course, I like organisms, but evolution is just, in terms of satisfaction, about why, you know, how does it all work? Why can we learn this way? And why is this? And why it's the biggest, you know, amount of, it's intellectual food, you know, it's you know, manna.
No, and it's you know, The Selfish Gene is a really good book. Stephen Jay Gould was the one that really got me going.
Oh, actually, yeah.
I love Stephen.
Like, oh, that's interesting.
And I like he deals with those little puzzles, and that's that was the one that they were the ones that tended to get me. So the other question I wanted to ask you, recent reads though, what would you recommend? Anything? It could
Boy,
be paper, even if it's not a book. I don't know. I'm just being nosy.
yeah. I mean, I tend to, I mean, I've been reading, I mean, this is going to just be the most boring answer ever, but I've been reading exclusively about English monarchs for, 5 or 6 years now. And so I've been, my dog reading has been not as much as it ought to be. It gets bumped.
You need that escapism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's just, it's also behavior, yeah. Boy, oh boy. There's an awful, I don't want to end on a downer. There's an awful lot of meh, like way too much of that. Let me, God, if only I could think.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, I did. I mean, the Kahneman book's probably about 10 years old, I suppose.
The which one?
The Daniel Kahneman book.
Oh yeah, no, that's a really good book, and
there's a really good one. There's another really good book in terms of the burnout prevention, and this is also probably about a 10-year-old, maybe 5 or 10-year-old book. It's called "The Better Angels of Our Nature" by Steven Pinker. He's a MIT, now Harvard guy who basically
recognize the book.
Things are better. If you need a bit of a salve for wow, the world is a piece of crap. He takes the broad view of the trend, and it makes me think in dog training and in animal welfare that the good guys are going to win. It's kind of a question of when.
But that was the thing when I did the seminars for you, a couple of years back. The book prizes, half of them were Steven Pinker books you were offering. I was thinking, you're obviously a Steven Pinker fan.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
No,
and he's good.
Quite a smart man.
Yeah, no, very smart. No, that's that's a good one to recommend.
Yeah, when are you going to come up with a new book?
At the moment,
something for public consumption. I mean,
so I've just actually this week submitted for the new edition of the BSAVA manual, which will take a more psychobiological approach.
Yeah.
And I've written a chapter for the new edition of Gary Landsberg's book, which sort of lays out the framework of the psychobiological approach and what it can potentially bring. And just one of the things I wanted to try and do was just, I still feel that just trying to get people to systematically think about whatever they want to label the behavior, but make sure you distinguish between context, motivation, and emotion. And
I just thought of a dog book. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
WAG by Zazie Todd.
Yeah, I've got it, but I haven't read it actually.
Yeah. Oh my God! I can't believe I blanked on that. Yeah, just towering survey of the research on how we can, and with lots of practical advice, how can we make our dogs more happy?
Yeah,
worthy subject.
I bought it because that's exactly why. And I don't know Zazie.
You ought to speak to. You ought to have her on your podcast.
Yeah, the problem is I don't. I'm not being exclusive. Well, I don't want to be snobbish, but if I don't know I think these work because I know.
Go to her site, Companion Animal Psychology.
I think I've got a feeling we're friends on Facebook. So maybe I need to just chat to her a little bit on Facebook. And, and then get to know her a little bit. I know a few people that she's quite a dynamo, I think, from what I hear.
She is, she and very influential and a good educator, organized, good thinker, science all the way through. Love her.
Okay,
and she's a Brit, so therefore you'll get
along. Is she Brit?
Yeah, she lives in British Columbia now in Canada, but she's originally. God, I want to say, oh God, I'm not sure where she's from. I'm not good at placing accents.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I might do that. I've got quite a long list of people to work through. So I'm quite happy if COVID carries on because I do a couple of these a month. But it's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said, I think it's been a real whirlwind, and we'll get this topped and tailed a little bit and get it out there. And
brilliant.
I anybody who listens to this has found it as fascinating as I have, or even a fraction
Yeah.
of
Well,
it.
at the very least, we had a good time.
Yeah, exactly. So if nothing else, so thanks a lot, and thank you for all you do. And that's one of the things. As I said, at the moment, I'm doing these chats only with people that I know who have been really helpful to me, and and I appreciate everything that you've done as well. So
Oh, likewise.
thanks a lot.
You're one of my heroes.
Well, we'll keep in touch anyway, and hopefully when COVID is over, I'll get back to the States, find out something to do. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye now.